People in Green Hollow think I came here a widow. I have never corrected them because a widow is a tidy thing, a woman with a sad story and no questions left in it. And I had run a very long way to be a woman with no questions left in her. The truth is plainer and stranger. 3 years ago, at 23, I walked out of the grandest hall in the north in the dark, with a half-grown child under my heart and one good cloak on my back. And I made certain that everyone who mattered believed I had died on the Western Road. I am told there is even a stone with no name on it, set where the river took the cart. I have never gone to look at it. It seemed unkind to disturb my own grave. I tell you the dying part first, so you understand the rest. I did not get cast aside, the way the story goes. I was not dragged weeping from a gate. I left. I chose the leaving, and I chose the silence after it, and I paid for both with 3 years of my life, and I would do every hour of it again, because of the small, fierce person currently standing on a kitchen stool, informing me that she has counted the eggs and there are 6, and 6 is not enough, and the brown hen is lazy. The brown hen is doing her best, I said. 6, said Posy, with the flat certainty of a girl who has just turned 3 and discovered numbers, and intends to use all of them on me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. That's very good counting. I know. She climbed down off the stool the dangerous way, which is the only way she knows, and I caught her by the back of her smock out of long habit and set her on the floor, and she ran off to harass the cat, and I went back to the dough, and that, flour to the wrists, a child shouting numbers at a cat, the brown hen blamelessly lazy. That was my whole life, and I had built it with my own 2 hands, and I was proud of it, the way you are only proud of things that nearly killed you. I want you to understand that it was a real life, not a hiding place dressed up as one. I had a stall in the market that earned. I had a debt with the miller and a better one with the cooper, and a standing argument with the woman who sells wool about whether her prices are honest. I had learned which of the village elders to flatter and which to feed, and I had a reputation, slowly and carefully built, as the egg woman who would extend you credit in a hard month and remember it kindly in a good one. None of that is the resume of a victim. I had not crawled into Green Hollow to lie down and wait. I had walked in upright, given a false name and a true skill, and made myself necessary, because a necessary woman is a safe woman, and I had made very sure to be both. When the elders had a dispute about the well rights 2 summers back, it was me they asked to right it fair, because I had a clean hand and no side in it. I tell you this so that when the grand part of the story arrives, and it does, with horses, you will know that the woman it arrives for was not waiting to be rescued. She was busy. She had eggs to sell. I should tell you about her eyes, since everyone else in this story is going to. Posy has grey eyes. Not the soft grey of a winter sky, which would be unremarkable. A pale, particular grey, ringed darker at the edge, the kind of grey that goes through you and decides what it thinks of you, and does not always tell you the verdict. There is exactly one other person in the world with eyes like that, and the last time I saw him, he was telling a hall of 300 wolves that I had betrayed him, in a voice I did not recognise, while I stood very still and counted my own heartbeats so that I would not scream. 1, 2, 3. The way he himself had taught me to do, years before, when I was new to the hold and frightened of everything. His thumb on the inside of my wrist. Count with me. Just breathe. Count. I taught that trick to our daughter without meaning to. She counts when she is upset. She counts when she is happy. She has no idea she learned it from a man she has never met, and I intend to keep it that way for as long as the world will let me. The world, as it turned out, had given me 3 years and was about to send a bill. It came on a market morning, the good kind, the square, full and loud, Fenna beside me at the stool with her bundles of dried feverwort and her opinions. Fenna is the healer here, and the closest thing I have to a sister. A square, solid woman who took one look at a half-starved, pregnant stranger 3 years ago, decided the stranger was hers now, and has not reconsidered since. She knows more of my truth than anyone. Not all of it, but more. And she has never once asked for the rest. It was a good morning, until it wasn't. We had sold most of the early eggs and all of the soft cheese, and Posy had negotiated a heel of honeyed bread out of the baker by the simple method of standing in front of his stall and counting his loaves out loud until he gave her one to make her stop. And I had let it happen, because a child who can extort a baker before noon is a child who will be fine in this world. The sun was warm. Fenna was telling me, at length, about a man 2 valleys over who had tried to pay her in geese, and what she had told him he could do with the geese, and I was laughing the easy laugh of a woman who believes the worst of her life is safely behind her, and 3 days from anywhere. "Riders," she said, not looking up from her bundles. I heard them before I understood them. Greenhollow does not get riders, not the iron kind, not the kind whose horses are taller than the men leading them. We are 3 days from anywhere that matters, which is the entire reason I picked us. But there they were, coming up the market road 2 and 2, and the crowd did the thing crowds do, folding back from the centre, going quiet in a spreading ring. And I felt the morning tip sideways under me like a boat. Because I knew that banner. Grey Field, Iron Wolf. I had slept under that banner. I had been sick with fear under it, and, later, briefly, stupidly, happy under it. And I knew exactly whose men rode beneath it. And I did the only sensible thing a dead woman can do when her own past comes up the road on horseback. I bent down behind the cheese. "Wren," said Fenna, "I'm reorganising the cheese." "You're hiding behind the cheese." "The cheese needs me." She did not laugh, which is how I knew she had already understood more than I wanted her to. Fenna has a gift for catching the shape of a thing without needing all of it. "Those colours," she said, low. "They're his, aren't they? The grey wolf. That's the one you don't talk about." "Posy," I said, instead of answering, because the cold had reached all the way down to the floor of me. "Where's Posy?" She had been at my knee. She was not at my knee. She was, I came up off my heels, scanning, market mother instinct overriding the dead woman instinct. She was 4 stalls down, where the riders had stopped to water the horses, because of course she was, because Posy loves horses the way she loves numbers and cats and trouble, with her whole uncomplicated heart, and she had walked right up to the biggest horse in the north and was looking up at the man getting down off it. And the man getting down off the horse was the king. I want to be honest about what I felt, because if I tell you it was only fear, I will have lied to you in the first hour of knowing me, and I would rather not. It was fear. It was also the other thing. The thing I had spent 3 years pressing flat under flour and feverwort and counting games. The helpless, traitorous lift of recognising a face you have loved. He looked older. There was grey at his temple that had not been there, a hardness in the set of his jaw that I did not remember, the particular gauntness of a man who has not been sleeping and has decided not to mention it. He looked like a man at the end of a long road that had not led anywhere. And he was looking down at my daughter, and my daughter was looking up at him with his own grey eyes, and the entire square had gone silent enough to hear the river. I have never moved so fast in my life. I do not remember crossing the ground. I remember being suddenly there, between them, on my knees in the market mud with my arms around her, my back to him, my whole body a wall. And I remember Posey's small, affronted voice saying, "Mama, I was talking to the man." And I remember the silence behind me changing. You can hear a silence change if it is about you. It goes from the ordinary hush of a crowd into something with edges, something that has noticed. I did not turn around. I was counting. 1, 2, 3. I had my face pressed to Posey's hair, and I was telling myself that any woman in a market kneels for her child, that there was nothing in it, that a man who believed me 3 years dead would not know the back of my head, that I could pick her up and walk away into the crowd and be no one. Then he said my name. Not loudly. That was the worst of it, that after 3 years, the first sound of me from him was not a shout, but a question, cracked down the middle, the voice of a man asking the air to please not do this to him. Ren. I have been asked since whether I considered running anyway. I did. I considered it with great seriousness, kneeling in the mud, for perhaps 2 heartbeats. And then Posey, who does not yet understand that some silences are not to be filled, patted my cheek with one filthy hand and said, helpfully, to the king, "That's my mama. Her name is Mama." And I stood up, because there was nothing else left to do, and because I have never in my life let that child face anything alone, and I was not about to start in front of him. I turned around. I had imagined this moment more times than I will admit. I had imagined it angry, and I had imagined it cold, and once, in a weak grey hour before dawn, I had imagined it kind. And none of my imaginings had prepared me for the truth, which was that the most feared man in the north looked at me, and then looked at the child holding my skirt, and then looked back at me, and could not speak. His mouth moved. Nothing came. The king of the Iron Wolves, the man whose voice had once filled a hall and ended a marriage, and unmade my whole life in the space of a breath, stood in the mud of a market 3 days from anywhere, and made no sound at all. His eyes went from her face to mine and back, doing the arithmetic, and I watched the answer arrive in him like a blow landing slow. Her eyes, her exact, particular, impossible grey. The math that any fool could do, and that he, clever as he was, could not stop himself doing. 3 years old. 3 years gone. He could count too. Behind him his men had gone to stone. One of them, a lean, grey-eyed older man I half remembered, Rune, his second, the one who never smiled, had put his hand out flat against the king's shoulder, not to restrain him, I think, but to hold something up that was about to fall. And in the king's chest, something made a sound. Low, not human, the wolf in him surfacing all at once, and Posey, who fears nothing, looked up at the noise with deep interest and said, "Is there a dog?" If you are listening to this story tonight, settle in, because the part you came for, why a king would let a woman walk away believing she'd betrayed him, what he'd really spent 3 years hunting, and who in his own court made sure I ran, none of that comes apart cleanly here in the square. It comes apart later, in pieces, the way true things do. If her standing in that mud with his eyes in her face, has its hooks in you the way it had them in me, do me one kindness before you go on. Tap the like and follow Moon and Iron, so the next woman's story finds you in the dark the way this one found you. Now, back to the man who couldn't speak. He went down, not gracefully. Kings are not built to kneel, and he did it badly, all at once, like a tower giving up, until he was on his knees in the same mud I'd knelt in, level with her, an arm's reach away, and not closing it. Because even drowning, he had the sense to know that a strange, large, weeping man does not reach for a 3-year-old without her mother's leave. He looked at me when he did it. He was asking. After everything, he was asking. I did not give it. Not yet. Posy, I said, in the steady voice I keep for cliffs and hot stoves and this. Go to Fenna. Count her bundles for her. I want a number. How many? All of them. I'll check. She went, because a job is a job, throwing one last interested look at the maybe dog, and the moment she was behind Fenna's skirts, I rounded on the kneeling king with 3 years of held breath behind my teeth, and said the truest and least wise thing I had. You told them I betrayed you. I know. His voice came back in fragments. Wren, you stood in front of the whole hold, and you said I'd sold the pack's defences to the Eastern Alphas. You said it like you believed it. You looked at me like I was a stranger you'd caught with a knife. I know what I did. His hands were open on his knees, the way you hold your hands when you have decided not to defend yourself. I have said it to myself every day for 3 years. I do not need you to tell me the words. I remember the words. Then why? I said, and my voice did the thing I had sworn it would not do. Why are you here, Garrick? 3 days from anywhere, looking like that? If you believed it, men don't ride to the edge of the world looking like death for a traitor they're glad to be rid of. And there it was, the thing I had not let myself wonder in 3 years, because wondering was a door I could not afford to open. The grey at his temple, the sleeplessness, the end of the road look. None of it was the face of a man who had moved on from a woman he'd rightly thrown away. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I wasn't looking for you. I want you to understand that first, because it is the worst part and you deserve the worst part first. I was not here for you. I came west, chasing Voss. The name landed in my stomach like a stone down a well. Voss. The counsellor with the soft voice and the soft hands who had been so very kind to me in those last weeks, so concerned, always finding me alone, always asking gentle questions about where I'd been, who I'd written to, whether the Eastern envoy had been friendly. I had been so grateful for his kindness. I had been a fool. He forged it, the king said. The proof. The letters in your hand that weren't your hand. The witness who swore he'd seen you at the Eastern camp. Voss built all of it, brick by brick. And he built it well, and his jaw worked. I believed it because believing it was easier than what believing it cost. A man who feels nothing does not have to be careful with what he loves. I told myself I felt nothing. I have been finding out for 3 years exactly how much that lie was worth. When, I said, my mouth had gone dry. When did you find out it was forged? 14 months ago. He said it flat, like a man reading his own sentence. A scribe died and confessed first. After that, I had Voss's own hand on 3 things he'd sworn were yours. I had the whole shape of it inside a week. He looked up at me, and the grief in his face was an old grief now, worn smooth, lived in. And then I had nothing to do with the truth but carry it, because the woman it cleared had been 14 months dead. There was a stone by the river. I went to it. I have spent 1.5 years hunting the man who killed you, with my own stupid certainty, so that I could put his head on the wall and tell your stone it was done. That is what I was searching for. A grave's worth of justice. I was so busy hunting the man who'd ended you that it never once occurred to me to wonder whether you'd ended yourself, walked into your own death on purpose, and out the other side of it, and kept walking, and... He stopped. He looked over at Fenna's stall, where a small, grey-eyed person was loudly miscounting bundles of feverwort, and his whole face came apart. And built a life, he finished, barely. With my... He could not say it. The wolf sound came again, low in him. Yours, I said, because one of us had to, and because she was standing right there, and I will not have her be a word a man cannot say. Her name is Posy. She is 3 years and 1 month. She counts everything, and she is afraid of nothing, and she has never had a father. And I need you to understand, before this goes 1 inch further, that I did not run to keep her from you. I ran to keep her from Voss. I heard my own voice shake and let it. I knew it was a frame. I knew it the moment you said the word, betrayed, because I knew I'd done nothing, which meant someone had built the nothing into something, and I knew that a child of yours, growing in a woman that man had just gotten condemned, would not live to be born inside those walls. So I died. I made it clean, and I made it final, and I made it somewhere with a river, and I came here, and I raised her, and I asked the world for nothing, and the world mostly left me alone. I wiped my face hard with the back of my flowery hand. You were not the thing I was protecting her from. You were just on the wrong side of the wall I had to build. That's the part you don't get to be the victim of, Garrick. I'm sorry. It's mine. He knelt there in the mud and took that the way he'd taken the rest, open-handed, not defending. And I thought, in the wreck of the moment, that he had learnt something in 3 years that the man in the hall had not known. The man in the hall had been certain. This one had given certainty up for good. I would like to tell you the hard part ended there. It did not, because Voss was 3 days from anywhere too, and Voss had not come all this way to be caught. He arrived that evening with 6 of the king's own guard who answered to him and not to the crown, while Garrick was still sitting on my too small bench, letting Posy stack pine cones on his knee and gravely accept each one as a gift of state. Fenna saw the second set of riders first, and came through my door without knocking, which she never does, and said 1 word. More. And I knew. I knew, and I did the arithmetic the king had done that morning, except mine ran the other way. 6 men, loyal to the one person in the world who needed me to stay dead. Because a dead traitor is a closed book. A living, cleared woman with the king's grey-eyed child on her hip is a witness, a wound reopened, a noose with Voss's name already in the knot. He had not ridden west to catch the king. He had ridden west to make sure that whatever the king found at the end of the road could never speak. Take her out the back, I told Fenna. The cellar, then the orchard wall, then the high path. Don't stop at the stone. Don't stop anywhere there's a name. Wren, count the steps for her, I said. She'll go quiet if she's counting. Go. Posy did not want to go. Posy wanted to stay and give the man more pine cones. I knelt and took her face in my hands and said the thing I had promised myself I would never have to say. The going away thing, light enough that she would not be afraid. I need a very big number, B. The biggest you've ever counted. Fenna's going to help you get all the way there. Can you do that for me? How big? Bigger than 6, I said, and kissed her forehead and let her go. And that is the last clean breath I remember before the door came open. Voss had a soft voice still, even then. There she is, he said, almost fond, stepping into my little house like it was his. I'd half hoped the road had lied. You always were difficult to be rid of. And to the king, sitting very still now on my bench, with no pine cones and no expression. My lord, you shouldn't have come so far. You find the worst things at the ends of roads. What happened next happened fast, and I will not pretend I saw all of it. Voss had a blade and a reason, and the king's own sworn men at his back, and the king had nothing but a bench between him and 6 swords, and a face that had gone past grief into something colder. Rune was somewhere outside with the loyal men, too far. It was going to come down to whether Voss could finish the sentence he'd started 3 years ago before anyone reached him, and the sentence was me, and I was closest. He came for me. Of course he did. I was the proof. He came across my own kitchen with that soft apology still on his face, and the king moved, too late, the wrong distance away, and I did the only thing there was to do, which was not brave, which was only fast. I put myself in the line of it. The blade meant for my throat opened my hand instead, palm to wrist, where I'd thrown it up. I have the scar still. Posy traces it sometimes and asks how many stitches, and I tell her 11, and she is satisfied because 11 is a good large number. It bled a great deal, and I felt almost none of it, because by then the king had crossed the distance that mattered, and the thing in him that I'd heard surface in the market that morning surfaced all the way. And Voss did not get to finish his sentence after all. It was over quickly. I will leave it there. Rune came through the door with the loyal men a breath later, and the 6 who'd answered to Voss discovered very suddenly that they answered to the crown. And someone wrapped my hand, and I sat down hard on the floor of my own house and held my opened palm to my chest and counted 1, 2, 3, until the room stopped tilting. The king knelt in front of me. He had done a great deal of kneeling that day, for a king, and did not touch me, only looked at the bound hand, and then at my face, and said, low and wrecked, "You stepped in front of it. You were too far away. You stepped in front of it." I have a daughter, I said, 3 days from anywhere, counting pine cones with a midwife. I'm not in the business of dying anymore. I just needed him to miss. I let my head fall back against the wall. I'm out of practice at being protected. You'll have to forgive me. I forgot it was an option. He made a sound that was half a laugh and half the other thing, and he bowed his head over my unhurt hand, not quite touching, the way you bow over something you have no right to, and want anyway. And we stayed like that a while, 2 fools on a kitchen floor, while outside the loyal men dealt with the disloyal ones, and the evening came down gentle over Greenhollow, as though nothing in particular had happened. I want to tell you about the square 3 days later, because it matters that he did it where everyone could see. He did not have to. He was the king. He could have asked me quietly in my kitchen, with no one to witness either the asking or my answer, and saved himself the spectacle of a crown humbling itself in a market town. Instead, He gathered Greenhollow into the square, the whole of it. Fenner and the lazy hen people, and the children and the old men who whittle. And he stood up on the steps of the well house where everyone could see, and he told them the truth. All of it. That he had condemned an innocent woman on a forger's word. That he had been too proud and too frightened of his own heart to look closely at a lie that flattered his certainty. That the woman who sold them eggs and bread was no widow, that the wronged Luna of the North, and that her daughter, and here his voice did the cracked thing again, her daughter was his, and his line, and that he had come 3 days from anywhere to find them by accident while hunting his own mistake, and that he did not deserve either of them, and intended to spend the rest of his life being grateful for them anyway, if they would have him. Then he came down off the steps, in front of all of them, and knelt. Again, the man could not stop kneeling, in the market mud where it had started. And he did not ask me to be his queen. He asked me to let him learn her. "I have no claim on you," he said. "I gave that up the day I believed a lie about you, and I won't pretend I have it back. But she is 3, and she counts everything, and I have missed every number so far. Let me start at whatever number we're on. That's all. Let me start there." Posy, who had been watching all of this from my hip, with the frank, evaluating interest she gives to everything, chose that moment to lean down toward the kneeling king and inform him, with enormous generosity, "We're on 100. I can count to 100 now." Fenner helped. 100, he repeated, looking up at her like she'd handed him the world. "It took ages," she said. "You weren't there." "No," he agreed, and his voice broke clean in two. "I wasn't. I'd like to be there for the rest, if that's all right with your mama." And they both looked at me, the same grey eyes, the same impossible particular grey, the man and the girl, waiting on my one word. And I discovered that 3 years of wall, built brick by brick with my own 2 stubborn hands, comes down a great deal faster than it goes up. "It's all right with her, Mama," I said. We did not marry that day, or that month. I had built a life, and I was not going to set fire to it for romance, and I told him so. And he, and this is how I knew the man had truly changed, agreed with me, and did not argue, and asked instead what it would take. So he learned Greenhollow before he asked me to leave it. He sent the Crown's healers to Fenner and asked her to teach them, which she did, insufferably. He fixed the well. He learned which hen was lazy. He let a 3-year-old beat him at counting every single night, losing worse and worse on purpose, until she caught him at it and was outraged, and made him promise to try, and he promised, and broke the promise immediately, because he could not help it, because he had 1.5 years of grief at a nameless stone to make up for, and only one way left to spend it. It took a season. By the time I said yes, there was nothing left to set fire to. We'd built the new thing carefully enough that the old life simply grew into it. I kept the stall. The North can come to Greenhollow on market day if it wants its Luna. I am not giving up the egg money for anyone, crown or no crown. 1 year on now, I am writing this from a window that looks down over a square I never thought I'd leave, and didn't have to, with the Iron Wolf banner flying over a town that used to be 3 days from anywhere, and is somehow, these days, the centre of everything. Posy can count past 1,000 and has opinions about all of it. She knows the whole story, the true one, told plain, because I will not have my daughter learn her own history from anyone but me. She knows her mother died on purpose to keep her safe and walked out the other side. She thinks this is the best part. "You died," she tells visitors, with relish. "And then you didn't." and the visitors don't know what to do with their faces. And I let her enjoy it, because she earned it. She was the biggest number I ever counted to, in the dark, 3 days from anywhere. And we got all the way there, the two of us. And then a man came up the road who couldn't speak, and learned how to count again. If you stay to the end, then you already know the thing it took him 3 years and a nameless stone to learn. That the worst lie is the one that lets you off the hook of loving someone. Don't believe the easy story about a person. It's almost never the true one. And the true one is almost always the one worth staying for. Stay with me then. Follow Moon and Iron, and I'll have another woman's true story for you next week, told from her side, in the dark, the way they're meant to be heard. Tell me in the comments, would you have opened the door? Or would you have stayed dead? I think you'd have opened it. I think that's why you're here. Good night from Green Hollow. Mind the brown hen. She's doing her best.